stranded in prison, there is greater chance that you will be kept under inhumane conditions. Overcrowding, poor sanitation and sleeping arrangements, personal improvement opportunities are all likely to be way below acceptable human rights limits. So, do we have anything to celebrate on International Human Rights Day? Our reporter Seth Kwame Boateng has been touring some prisons across the country and he has an incredible story to tell us. He joins us now in studio. Seth, you're very tired. I know you made a long journey to get here, so I'm grateful that you could join us.
Thank you for hosting me.
You toured several prisons in Ghana. What's the story from the prisons?
Well, I started from Tamale Central Prisons. I spent a number of days there. Then I moved to Sunyani Central Prisons, then Kumasi Central Prisons, and today then Salem Central Prisons. And the conditions are terrible.
Terrible.
The prisons are choked.
So overcrowding is the first thing.
Overcrowding is the order of the day.
Wow.
Because you take, for example, the Salem prisons built to occupy or host about 800 inmates now takes a little over 3,000.
Oh my God, and where do they sleep?
Exactly, that's the problem. And 64 of them are remand prisoners. Some have been there for 5 years, 7 years, 8 years. They have not been tried. They have not been convicted.
That's pathetic.
You move to Kumasi. Prison was also built to host like 800 or so people. And now it has over 2,000 inmates with about 700 of them being remand prisoners. So you can just imagine. The story is not different in Tamale, not different in Sunyani. So that's the problem there.
What about, look, let me ask you, did you see Kwokesi? He's on remand.
Yeah,
right?
He's on remand. I saw him 2 days ago when, in the morning when he was being taken to court, I saw him. I believe he had hopes that he would not return to the prison that day. Unfortunately, he came back with his handcuff. I saw him when he got out of from the car. He looked so angry, very, very angry. He had to, with his handcuff, go and wash his hands and enter the prisons. And where he is, where Kwokesi is, that is where we have about 700 inmates who are on remand.
Oh my God.
And the rooms available, the cells available are too small to contain them, to host them. So, for example, 75 of them share just a small room.
How small? Give it a dimension. Let's say you walk 3 feet here, 3 feet there, or 4 steps, 5 steps.
Oh,
you've covered the
yeah, about 10 steps, 10 steps, 10 steps.
Oh man, that's very small.
And let me tell you something. Some of them squat till the next day. Some of them stand till the next day.
Oh my
Some
God.
sleep on their side.
That's very pathetic.
Exactly.
I mean, I know that we're expecting a special report from you over the conditions that you're experiencing, but we'll keep you here briefly and get onto the telephone line and speak to former Shrike boss, Dr. Emil Short, who is joining us. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening. The line is not very clear. I hope I can hear you.
Yes, okay. I'll speak a little louder and see if you can hear me. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I could. My battery is, I think, low. That's
right.
why.
So we'll be quick with it. Now, human rights record in Ghana. Is it anything to write home about?
Well, at least with regard to media freedom, I think we can be proud of, media freedom, the landscape. We have over 200 radio stations and more than 30 private TV stations. And that is something that we can be proud of. So there is freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. These are rights which are well observed in Ghana. However, when it comes to areas like prisoners' rights, right to right to fair and speedy trial, we have serious challenges. We have many remand prisoners who have been in custody for long periods without trial, and that's a serious concern. The conditions in the prisons are also very bad.
Very bad.
Overcrowding and very inadequate health facilities and even feeding, So that's an area also where we have very serious challenges.
Serious challenges. Now, may I ask you, whilst you were Shrad boss, I mean, these issues had existed before your time, but did you make recommendations to the relevant state institutions to begin to address some of these shortfalls?
Of course, with regard to prison conditions, we have made recommendations time and time again about what needs to be done. For example, at one stage, I suggested that there should be closer collaboration between the prison service, the police, attorney generals, and the court to ensure that cases do not, delay excessively. Because in some cases, the police do not collect prisoners from the prison, and therefore the cases are not brought to court. And the courts then don't know the courts don't proceed with the matter. It's adjourned, and then what happens is that, the cases hang on for years, and nobody is aware that the case is pending. So there should be a means of monitoring the progress of these cases by these various institutions. And I think one could get a software that would enable the various institutions to monitor the progress of the cases.
Now, if we take a quick look at the 2014 UN report of the Special Rapporteur on Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, Ghana was cited for torture, ill treatment, poor conditions of detention and deprivation of liberty in mental health care facilities. As Shrad boss, would you be able to defend Ghana's reputation or credibility in these areas?
Well, I have been out of office for about 3 years now, so I'm not very familiar with the conditions relating to mental health and so on. I am aware of the conditions relating to the overcrowding, the lack of adequate facilities, and proper nutrition. But the other area, I'm not familiar what the present situation is like, so I really cannot comment. But I think the greatest challenge in terms of human rights is economic and social rights.
That's right.
The economy being what it is, people's right to a reasonable standard of living, that area poses a great challenge, We all know the economy is in crisis. That's why we've gone to the IMF and so on. So those are areas where, the lack of adequate educational facilities, so the right to education, the right to an adequate standard of living, those areas we have serious challenges. We also have challenges in terms of, cultural rights. We still have witches' camps where, women are discriminated against. We are, assaulted physically, psychologically, and they are banished from the communities to go to witches' camps where they don't have adequate, standard of living. So that's another area that is a very serious violation of human rights.
Justice Short, we're very grateful for your time on today's big story. Justice Emil Short is the former Shrad boss. So, sir, Justice Short raised a key issue which I want to maybe raise with you. Did you observe perhaps a few inmates being sick, and what health facilities were available to ensure they got quick and timely care before it gets
For example, yesterday, before I left the Kumasi Central Prisons, they had just brought in an old man I saw in the morning who was very ill. They took him to hospital. Each prison has an infirmary. So anytime...
And these infirmaries are well equipped?
Not at all. Not at all.
That they're just infirmary by their names?
And they have medical officers there to attend to inmates. But if they come in with serious conditions, they are referred to the nearest hospital. Then that hospital, if it can't handle, will refer the inmate to maybe in Kumasi, maybe
nearby regional hospitals.
Yeah, nearby regional or bigger hospitals. So with regards to the infirmary and health care, they need support, seriously. I think each prison needs a clinic, not an infirmary. Because just look at the number. For example, here in Sawami, with over 3,000 inmates, okay, with just that infirmary taking care of them together with the officers, because they also get ill. They contract diseases in the prisons.
Yeah.
Some coming with tuberculosis, chicken pox, and the officers are also affected. So they're also taking care of.
A typical example which stirs in our memory is the passing of Sima.
Sima, exactly.
I mean, we are told that the autopsy report suggested that he died
appendicitis.
of appendicitis.
Yes.
And this is very sad that somebody should die of ruptured appendicitis in this day and age.
Yeah, I got details of that that story today from them. The fact that he was transported from there when he complained. They attempted to take care of him, but it was beyond them, so they referred him to the Nsawam prisons, where they later got an ambulance to transport him to Accra. But when they got to the it was too late, and there they didn't have bed for him.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
So moving from frying pan to fire. Now, did you encounter juveniles in detention?
I can't tell of their
underage people.
No, really, in our prisons. Okay. You know, they have a special place.
That's right.
But I saw younger ones also in there, and some have been on remand for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years.
And they were kept in the same conditions as the adults.
Exactly, because their prosecutors don't come in for them. Some have been there. Today, this morning, about 3 inmates in some prisons told me that for 5 years they've never been to court. They've never been. They don't even know their prosecutors, and they are there. Somebody fought with a friend. He was arrested 5 years ago, and he's still there, just fighting with a friend, and the person is still there.
It's unbelievable. So what do authorities tell you about these conditions? I mean, you witnessed overcrowding, you've witnessed poor healthcare facilities, you've witnessed quite a number of things in the various prisons that you've been to. What exactly are the prison authorities saying? I'm sure that they will say they're not to blame.
Yeah, because, you know, they are only told to take care of those the judges will say should be in prison. They are just there to receive. They can't send you away. The moment you are brought in with a warrant, they have to accept you, just like that. So they will say it's not their doing, and I saw that. But what they are trying, what government is trying now, as the officers told me, to decongest the prisons, is this non-custodial sentences they are trying to implement. Where if, for example, somebody steals a bunch of plantain,
rather than give him a prison term, you could make him serve community.
Exactly, the person can go and just sweep the Kumasi Central Market or Accra Central.
For 4 days?
Not 4 days, for like a week or two. And that's enough punishment, because you are sending this person in and you are going to feed the person 3 times daily. The person will be sick, you have to take the person to hospital. Just do the calculation, the cost to the nation.
Very pathetic. We're joined on the line now by Abina Asumeni Entry, who is the Executive Director of Angel Zoe Foundation. Good evening, ma'am, and thanks for your time. Good evening, madam, and thanks for joining us on today's Big Story.
Good evening, sir.
Now,
thank you.
Good. I'm happy. Now, what is your assessment of human rights generally in our prisons, care for juveniles, etc., etc.? I'm sure you may have done some work in this area. What's your assessment?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm asking you, what is your assessment of the human rights situation in Ghana?
I'll introduce myself or my work by saying that I've been in this area for close to 8 years now, and I've seen gradual improvements, I must say.
Right.
But the fact remains that a lot more needs to be done. The congestion in the prisons, I think that one is a known fact.
Yeah.
My NGO focuses a lot on reintegration of prisoners or ex-convicts. And that means that what our strategy has been is to start the work from within. Now, you would think that the institution itself or setup of justice administration would support the entire effort in what we are trying to do. But there are a few gaps as identified. some, for instance, the duration. I know you were talking a bit about the prison service, but
That's right.
I think that human rights abuses are happening right from the beginning of arrest until the end, once the person is incarcerated, exactly. Because there are people who, when you interact with, tell you, we were here for this number of days, we didn't have access to a lawyer, we didn't do this, we were encouraged by a policeman to say guilty without, all sorts of things. Now,
I mean, lack of access to lawyers, etc., all constitute the challenges that they face.
And I think a very unnecessary long duration of remand, being on remand, and sometimes you'll be on remand for quite a bit of time, just to realize that, you were found not guilty in the end. And who do you appeal to on such a case? You understand what I mean?
Yes, I do.
The other issue for me is that we as a people, and I mean government, as civil society, as ordinary citizens, if we as a people have in mind to better our human rights situation or conditions in Ghana, I think that it starts from government's commitment.
Right.
To, for instance, we say we are going to take juveniles, for instance, and rehabilitate, reform, rehabilitate, and then reintegrate them into society, right?
Yes.
Now, when you go to some of the institutions I've worked with, you realize that the facilities for the rehabilitation are just not there, or are just not enough. You understand?
I do.
So it's almost as if we are making a mockery of the reformation and rehabilitation effort. You understand?
Yes.
Now, feeding is another issue. We have all manner of people. We have all categories of people in the prisons. We have aged, we have sick, we have pregnant people, we have lactating mothers, we have juveniles, growing young people, who have different nutritional needs. So, for instance, if it's on government's budget that feed prisoners with 1 cedi, 80 pesos per 3 meals a day. I mean, for me, it's a human rights abuse.
Right. So, Madam, let's talk about the role of civil society groups. I do know that you mentioned that you have worked in this area for about 8 years, and a lot of other civil society groups may have worked in similar areas as well. Yeah. I want to know what your contribution to ensuring that such human rights are minimized, or they do not happen at all in our prisons. What kinds of engagements do you normally have with these institutions or state institutions that are responsible to ensuring that these people who come out of prisons, their rights are not trampled upon?
What you can do is, when you meet a particular person whose rights has been abused, the first is to let them know that some people don't even know. Ignorance is a major thing. They don't even know that the human rights abuse has been caused. So it's the awareness that we try to create.
So you have been creating awareness.
We try awareness. We are doing advocacy. We are trying to do a research right now on the linkage between poverty, for instance, and crime, the perpetration of crime. Because if you look at a lot of the young people we have assisted, for instance, and the rate of recidivism, why go back into prison, is because for my NGO, it's small. We are still growing.
Right.
We don't have the capacity to continue, like taking one person from prison and taking them through to, let's say, university.
Yes.
We have one person at the university right now, though, but we can't increase the numbers. You understand?
Because your funding is limited.
Funding is limited.
That's right.
You have institutional challenge, of course. Sometimes what you are trying to do, people do not understand, and frankly, they don't understand the relevance. Or even if they do understand the relevance, it's almost as if, well, you're just wasting your time.
So what, you think that governments and other state institutions and perhaps individual organizations and institutions have not been helpful to CSOs who have an obligation or obligations to perhaps champion the rights of prisoners, for example?
I think that I want to lay the blame solely at the doorstep of government. I think it's everybody's
fault.
Take on this. Right. Yes, our commitment as a people really leaves much to be desired. Because if, for instance, the institutions we are granted access to the prisons when need be, if you want access to particular players, key players in the justice administration, sometimes access is difficult. You could write all the formal letters and nobody's going to mind you.
Nobody's
you
saying
understand?
anything. Yes,
now, another aspect is that the civil society organizations involved in this, we are not speaking in a collective with a collective voice. And that is one area that needs to be looked at.
How do you mean? I mean, when you say collective voice, I mean, well, how else could you speak variously on human rights issues, for example? You must have one voice, and that's what I think is being done. Or is there anything different?
I do agree. But for instance, I'm going to choose the issue of the feeding. Government's commitment to feeding prison inmates, for instance. I'm going to speak on that. And that's to say that if, for instance, a lot more of us were speaking on this subject, that increase the quota given to feeding inmates, give them better medical care, you understand? And we are not all doing our little bits in different corners. Yes, even though we are effective in our own rights, I think that would have, I'll call it bargaining power.
Right.
If we come to speak, we get to the table and speak to government, speak to all the partners or stakeholders in this area, and then we'll get certain results. You understand?
Yes,
it might be 2 years to get certain things to go through, but that would be 2 years well spent, wouldn't it?
Right. Well,
yes.
We're grateful for your time on today's Big Story.
Thank you,
very
sir.
much.
Thank you for having me.
Joining us. Let's get on to the other telephone line now and speak to DCOP Ampa Beni, who is Director of Police Public Relations. He's joining us now. Good evening, sir.
Yeah. Director General, Public Affairs Department.
Director General of the Public Affairs Department. We are grateful. Now, the police service and its reputation on human rights. We do know in Ghana that sometimes police is cited in forceful arrests, and then you have been cited too for practice of torture, ill treatment, arbitrary shooting of death to criminals, etc. On a day like this, International Human Rights Day, what is the police service doing to improve its image in the minds of the general public who want to see effective human rights implementation in the service?
Thank you very much. But it seems the image you are painting for the Ghana Police Service is very frightening. Ghana has the best human rights record in the whole of Africa. So how you have the length, the height at which you have taken us is frightening.
Right,
we don't have such a brutality
but the UN Special Reports, the Rapporteur on Human Rights, Crime Issues and Torture, have cited that these things do exist in the police service, although they were honest to say that it's not a country-wide problem. There are instances that these things are being cited.
Yeah, you know, Ghana Police Service has gone through major transformations from the colonial era.
Yes.
Yes, we were just supposed to protect the status quo. And then, so at that time it was a force.
It was a force, okay.
Yeah, it was a force. Throughout the Champa regime, it was a force. Until somewhere in 1980, it became a service. So the force nature gradually is being shirked off.
It's being shirked off.
Yeah, for a full democratic policy where the people themselves are together with the police, manning the affairs of the citizens in the country.
Right, so it means that from what you're saying, it means that the image of the police service today is much better than it was 10 years ago.
That is why I'm saying that the picture we are painting is very frightening because we have the best democratic policy in Africa currently. So we have, as I speak to you now, the Ghana Police Service, even in those days when it was a force, instituted the special unit to check their own men.
Right.
Who probably may go on perform some excesses in terms of killings and other things. And then we had our own special police command after the special unit. And now we have the police intelligence and professional standards.
Yes.
To check our own personnel. This means not because of any human rights organization or United Nations something. It is the police themselves who saw that there is a need for us to check excesses in the service.
Right.
So we have all this in place to check our men. And to me, personally, I believe that this is the best police the country can ever have.
Right.
For an organization to issue another department to check its own personnel. You see, so And I stand to be corrected. There's not a single organization in Ghana here, or a unit, an institution which has established such a department to check interest. There's none. So if we're talking about human rights, I think Ghana police need to be recommended.
Needs to be recommended. Now, the conditions in police cells have also been cited as very, very inhumane. They've cited, the UN reports have cited conditions in the police cells and prison services. What is the police service doing to improve conditions in their cells? Because we do know that not all cells really across the country are in good order.
It's true. That is correct. Our cells may not be the best. But look, mind you, the police themselves, the cells are within the police station, and the personnel are also there. So they are also exposed to such stench coming from the cells. This is a plan that right now. So, but because of aid, and we have been able to convert more than 200 pound latrines into water closets.
So you should be commended. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes, and even some of the police stations themselves, for all you know, even the personnel themselves are using parliamentary, and we are changing them. It's not only themselves. So this one we can call for stakeholders. Everybody all hands and that to change all this. The government alone cannot do all this.
Right.
Even we had an international aid, which enabled us to change most of them. But there are single structures within the barracks which still have this water closet, the parliamentary. So, with the assistance from the general public and stakeholders, we believe that by next year or two, all these things will be a thing of the past.
Right. So, but you do agree that these challenges need to be addressed as much as possible.
Exactly, and we need.
And what kind of support?
The challenges facing the policemen also, and the barracks also, together with themselves, need to be addressed.
But are you getting enough support from the relevant ministry, the Minister of Interior, for example, in addressing some of these challenges?
Sure, we are getting enough support. But you know, the police service is now expanded. Now, you know, our number is over 30,000. You see, when we joined the police from 30 years ago, the police were just about 11,000, 12,000. Now we are about 35,000. So these are the challenges that we are facing.
Right, DCOP, we are grateful for your time on today's Big Story. Thanks very much for joining us. And let's finish off with James Agaga, who is Deputy Interior Minister. He's joining us on the telephone now. Quickly, sir, we're grateful you could join us. What is government doing to improve human rights records in the security services in general?
Well, thank you very much. This is a very broad question, and I guess I would need close to half an hour.
Half an hour to answer.
Be able to do justice to the question.
That's right.
I'll be very brief. I'll just give you some highlights of what government has done over the period to improve upon the human rights record of the security agencies. First of all, let me start with... hello?
Yes, I'm here, sir.
I should start with the police and say that as part of our policy, we have made it compulsory that when police are training their recruits, they incorporate
human rights training.
Human rights, you know, as part of their training. You know, it's compulsory. So they take courses in human rights, criminal law, criminal procedure, etc., to make them abreast with certain human rights trends and the human rights provisions enshrined in the Constitution, notably Chapter 5. So it is a way of getting them to understand and appreciate that in the course of their duties, they need to be mindful that the citizenry have certain rights which must be respected at all times.
Right, Mr. Gaga, I'll cut you in. I'm sorry, we have a very short time, but let's talk briefly about poor conditions in prisons. This keeps coming up very often. I mean, international human rights reports have cited poor conditions in our prisons very often. What is government doing to improve conditions in the prisons?
Well, first of all, I must say that the government has a policy to expand the infrastructure of the prison. And so if you go to Ankafo now, you realize that we have the Ankafo maximum prison facility, which has been commissioned. We're expanding it further to ensure that officers have accommodation. But most important of all, we have other strategies in place, like the Justice for All program, where prisoners on remand are, of course, given the right to be heard in court set up within the prison.
Right.
And the Justice for All program has led to the release of quite a number of prisoners on remand.
Right.
We are also, of course, about to introduce some legislation, which legislation would bring about non-custodial measures in our criminal jurisprudence, so that petty offenders are not thrown behind bars or incarcerated. They can be made to serve community sentence, etc., as a strategy for decongesting the prison.
Right, Mr. Agaga, quickly.
These are some of the strategies
that you're putting in place. We appreciate that. We know that your time is, but I want to ask one last quick question. I mean, looking at things that you're narrating, things that you're telling me, which you're doing to improve conditions in the prison service and also improve the human rights record of security agencies, are you hopeful that a year today, when we come up to read the report, the special human rights report on Ghana, anything will improve?
Of course, a lot will improve. We are hoping that when we eventually introduce non-custodial measures, to a large extent, the prisons would be decongested. A lot of the human rights issues that come up are as a result of the congestion in the prison facilities.
Right.
So once we're able to decongest, I can assure you a lot will change.
A lot will change. Mr. Agaga, I'm grateful for your time on today's Big Story. James Agaga is Deputy Interior Minister. My name is Stephen Enti, and thanks for joining us on today's Big Story. We'll be right back with an interactive segment. Do stay.